Welcome to Shrink, a psych view on the films with Dr. Colleen Mullen and Courtney Calkins, bringing lessons learned from the big screen into our own lives.
Hey, what is up, Warriors? This is the Quad Father here with Colleen Mullen right outside. Come on in. Colleen, welcome to This Is Your Life. No, it's not your life. It's Hannah's life. How are you?
That's right. I'm good, Courtney. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's lessons learned from the big screen, maybe the big screen in the living room or something, because we're doing a Netflix series this time of 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah, I think I felt compelled to do this. I know you're a bit resistant on it because of how tough it was.
It really was a tough topic, but well-told movie. The story was thorough, based on a book of the same name, and it was challenging because as a parent of kids in high school, to get an insight into what they go through and the different areas of their lives that they have to kind of defend against. For us, it was just sitting in our seats and on the playground and maybe on the bus and whatever. But for them, social interaction is constant, and
it doesn't just happen face to face. It's all the social media stuff, and then it continues outside of school, and there's just so much pressure on students, on teenagers, peer pressure. We had peer pressure. You want to be liked, you want to be in the popular crowd. I know I wasn't, but I think part of the thing in kind of saying that, I think part of that is also the reflection that so much of what goes on in this show was about the perception that they were the only one. Mm-hmm. And I think in saying that, we all wanted to be part of that, but I wasn't. When you're a teenager, everything feels small. Everything feels like you're the only one going through something. So there was actually so much to talk about this that we decided we're going to do 2 episodes on 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah,
it's just called 13 Reasons, right?
13 Reasons Why. But yeah, we couldn't do the topic justice and make it any shorter. So we're going to have round 1 and round 2. And I don't think it's necessary. If you are a person who is curious about 13 Reasons Why and isn't going to watch it, then I think this podcast will make sense. We're going to highlight some of the details, some of the psychological pieces that come out, and pretty much everything's psychological in this because we've got a girl's life and death at the end of this, and all her social relationships, and then the cassette tapes that she left that kind of explained how she viewed why it was these 13 reasons why she killed herself. So you can either watch or have not watched, and maybe this will inspire you to watch the whole thing, but definitely you can listen to this podcast or these podcasts without having viewed the whole thing. And we have 2 different themes. The first theme is what, Colleen?
Today we're going to try and keep it focused on suicidality, what causes a person to die by suicide, to make that attempt, and the things that go into it, and then about the blame after a person's death, survivors of suicide, and the blame that she left. You mentioned these cassette tapes, and so I'll get to that in 1 second because I just realized that I need to tell everybody what the second part is going to be. The second part is going to then be about all the other themes in the show. It's going to be about date rape. It's going to be about peer pressure. It's going to be about what it's like to have a quote unquote bad reputation as a girl and what that can feel like. And then of course, teenage thinking and how small everything is, and you never see the light at the end of the tunnel. You think everything is happening today is going to be the way the rest of your life looks. So that's going to be part 2. Today we're going to keep it limited to the suicidal stuff and the blame that happens, which is the major theme of the show. To get us started, I know we have this intro clip of Hannah, but you've mentioned these tapes. The intro is that we find out from day 1, we're not spoiling anything here, the whole show is about a girl that has killed herself and then left a series of 13 tapes for her friends, which blame each tape contains the story of how one friend, each person was responsible or played a part in this girl's decision to kill herself. Why don't we get right into it, Courtney?
Hey,
clip number 1.
It's Hannah Baker.
Holy shit.
Don't adjust your whatever device you're hearing this on. It's me, live and in stereo. No return engagements, no encore, and this time absolutely no requests. Get a snack, settle in, because I'm about to tell you the story of my life.
More specifically, why my life ended.
And if you're listening to this tape, you're one of the reasons why. I'm not saying which tape brings you into the story, but fear not. If you receive this lovely little box, your name will pop up. I promise.
So obviously this all starts after Hannah has committed suicide and these tapes are making their rounds. And we follow Clay, who's our lead guy, into Clay Jensen, into him finding out all of these facts, or Hannah's version of the facts, about the people in his peer group. And later in the episode, and just to kind of round out her description, she kind of gives what I call Hannah's hit list and who did what and how that impacted her life, and it led to her looking at the reason that she was going to commit suicide. So here's Hannah's hit list.
I recorded 12 tapes. I started with Justin, and then Jessica, who each broke my heart.
Hey.
Alex, Tyler, Courtney, Marcus, who each helped to destroy my reputation.
Did you just...
It's real tight.
On through Zach and Ryan, who broke my spirit. Through tape number 12. Bryce Walker, who broke my soul. But a funny thing happened as I finished number 12. I felt something shift. I had poured it all out. And for a minute, just a minute, I felt like maybe I could beat this. I decided to give life one more chance. But this time, I was asking for help. Because I know I can't do it alone. I know that now.
That's where you want to catch her, right?
Yes, there's usually a window of opportunity somewhere when someone is depressed or hopeless or thinks that there's no way out. There's often at least a tiny window of opportunity, and Hannah had resolved that she was going to record these tapes and be done with herself, and thought, well, let me just go see what happens when I ask for help. And it did not go the way that anybody would have liked it, certainly not Hannah.
Yeah, we'll cover that, because that was a pretty rich section there where she goes to the counselor. Yeah. But you and I have both been impacted by suicides of people that are close to us who really, even maybe not in perfect hindsight, but in relative hindsight, came out of the blue.
Yes, absolutely.
So go ahead. You were alluding to it earlier before we turn on the mics that you've been impacted by a surprise suicide.
Oh yeah, and I've talked about this before, and in fact, we'll link the episode that I talk about my brother's suicide from Coaching Through Chaos, and we'll link that in the show. But yeah, my brother died. It's coming up on 10 years, July 1st this year, and he was depressed and he was suicidal over the years, and when he actually did it, where he went through with it and did not pull us into his attempt, often I was pulled in before his cry for helps. And I would call the police across the country and have him picked up and put in the hospital and do all those things. So he was looking for help at those times. The last time, the time that stuck, where he actually did kill himself by suicide, he didn't. He actually called the day before and said, "Hey, how are you doing? I'm just calling to check on you and see how it's going." And he sounded great. And I thought, well, I'll give him a call during the week when I get a chance. And the next day he was dead.
Wow.
And I thought, gosh, well, and you think, and I saved the voicemail, and you think, did I miss something? He sounded okay. I talked to him last week. When people get to that point, they often say it looks like they are fine again. They might have been depressed, but it looks like they're fine. But what they know is that they kind of come to a place of resolution, and they made that decision, and then it kind of unburdens them from the struggle of, do I or don't I? How much longer can I stick out and deal with this psychological pain?
And that's kind of where Hannah got after talking to the counselor. She's like, I'm trying this one more time, like we just heard on the tape. She walks in, talks to the counselor. It doesn't go the way that she wanted or had hoped, and that was it. She was resolved. And for me, it was a friend of mine who was 23 years old. I had known him since he was 5. I worked side by side with his mom for over 20 years now. And we're both counselors. And we're looking at him, and he had everything going in the right direction. We talk about, did he have plans? What was it? Well, the plans that we knew of were the next morning he was going to go shopping. The next day he went, because it was a Friday night. Next day he would go to work. On Monday he had these things he was taking to the guys, and it wasn't like goodbye stuff. So it was like, boy, we figured it. He got too drunk. He texted an old girlfriend, didn't go the way he wanted, and just killed himself, like a spontaneous suicide. And it's like, you kind of just, they talk about it, and we'll get to it, but they talk about kids' brain, the frontal lobe development. It's like, we just want to get them to 25, and we could only get them to 23 on that one. So it was like, we've done a lot of questioning ourselves, like, what did we miss? How do we miss it?
For as much as the show is built around Hannah and her blame, the parents are left to blame. And I know the struggle for my parents, like you mentioned that your friend's son had drank too much. I know that wasn't the case with my brother, because my parents wanted to blame something. I was the one that was in charge of asking the medical examiner to do the further test to find out if he was intoxicated or not, or what could have influenced him, and he wasn't. But people want to blame somebody, they want to blame something. So, he drank too much, or he did this, or somebody upset them, like Hannah, and in this movie, and I know we have a clip, maybe that's where we should go, with the parents and the mother's speech. Another theme in this about the blame is that the parents are now suing the school district because they believe that the school was responsible. So there's some interaction between the mother and the parents in the school district.
How did we not know? How did I not know? She was right here, and she was in pain, and she was reaching out, and we just kept pretending everything was okay.
Honey, I think we just need to keep things in perspective. We can't only blame ourselves or be looking for signs everywhere. Okay?
Maybe we should be blaming ourselves. I mean, if we weren't so preoccupied with the fucking store.
The store's how we survive.
No. The store was for you, to get you out of that company that was killing you, to get us out of that shitty suburban wasteland. And if my parents hadn't given us that loan,
the loan.
we would
the loan, always the loan. If we hadn't taken that loan and bought the store.
And I actually just kind of faded it out there, because that's how couples do it, right? They start with one place of this pain point of, why didn't we notice this in our daughter or our son or whatever, and it denigrates into, well, if we hadn't, a lot of bargaining, right? Because the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. That's a lot of bargaining in this. If only this person would have said that. If only this event hadn't occurred. Because in order to go back and say, I could have prevented it at that time, you have to do something different, which means you have to kind of bargain with the past and say, if the A, B, and C, or A, B, and D would have happened instead of A, B, and C, I could have made a difference. And the parents are rightfully struggling at this point.
And as you meant, the bargaining, right, over the blame, and if I've done this and done that. And for as much as this movie is about, or this show is about, the outward blame of others, there's also the inner struggle that everybody starts to go through when they hear Hannah's account of how she was affected by their actions. In many ways, I think the reason a lot of people gravitated towards this show, for better or for worse, is that there's so many relatable themes in here. And, when you have a struggle when you're young, you wish everybody knew how bad they made you feel. And this show just kind of says, well, here, we're going to outline it. This is what we witnessed, and this is how it affected me. And it's kind of like, man, I wonder what would have happened if everybody knew back then, or kids that are today. I'm speaking back then. It's a long time ago for me in high school. But, I think everybody has something that they relate to in there.
The interesting thing is, if you would have kind of gotten a personality snapshot in the first 1 or 2 episodes and not known who was going to kill themselves, you wouldn't have picked Hannah.
No.
She was not the kind of the brooding, tormented individual, at least as she was presented in the show, and even in the hindsight of the interactions and social relationships that she had. You would have thought she was friends with all these people that she is kind of calling out if you'd have watched their relationship, even though clearly they didn't have good, positive, healthy relationships, and they gave each other a lot of crap, and they did harm each other, and they hurt each other, and they wrecked each other by feelings, but also there was some resolution and some amends and some healing that happened throughout those relationships too. But you wouldn't have predicted that Hannah was going to be the one to take her own life.
And in fact, with some of that healing, though, Hannah didn't catch it. Often when you're feeling so helpless, so isolated, so alone, even when there is repair, I think at some point she says Clay, who is the boy who had the crush on her that wished he had told her more and all that stuff, even when she thinks back to that, the counselor says something about being friends with Clay, and she says, no, Clay hates me. Right. Clay didn't hate her, but that was her perception. Sometimes you get lost in the tragedy of your own perceptions of what your life looks like.
And that's the trick, is because we all clearly we don't ourselves to commit suicide, and we don't want the people we love and care about to take their own lives either. And it's like you want to get in there and figure out, all right, how do I figure out what's going on with this person? Are they at that place? And here's one of the clips that points to how to know what other people are thinking.
No one knows what's really going on in another person's life. And you never know how what you do will affect someone else.
Hey, Bryce, what's up? Hey, Jensen.
And if that goes for me, it must go for everyone. Even cheerleaders.
That's one of the things that I always remind people in my life, and sometimes my wife. I'm like, I missed the mind reading day in counseling class. I'm not good at mind reading. I can, figure out things psychologically and socially and relationally, but I don't know what's going on in someone else's head. I mean, no one knew that Hannah was headed out to, had resolved to kill herself. And you also don't know the impact of your behaviors, right? Because if someone's not going to tell you that they hurt your feelings, or that you hurt their feelings, or that what you did or said was rude, or they took that comment on social media to be really, really serious, or you liked a post that somehow was related to something that they saw was negative, you just can't know how someone else is going to take it. Yet we want to, because nobody wants to drive someone to suicide. And
we definitely are going to cover like cyberbullying in part 2, but this brings up that whole thing of the going down the spiral to suicidal type of depression. Is just you don't know what's going on in her mind. And that's why when people do say things, because Hannah did say some things that would, especially in that in her meeting with the counselor, her last ditch effort, that certainly made you say, hey, as a therapist, man, you should have been asking a lot more questions.
Yeah, that was hard to watch from our perspective.
Another person's decent day is another person's tragic one. Another person's, high is another person's okay, because they just aren't feeling the same way, right?
Right. They're coming in loaded from one perspective or another, kind of filtered.
Yes.
So you could go to a party and think that someone had a great time, and they came in with a different filter. They were trying to get someone's attention, or wanted certain things to happen at the party or not happen, and you could never tell, because you don't know what's going through their head and what filter they walk into situations or walk out of situations with. Here's an interesting one where Sky, she's our tormented barista with the tattoos. A lot of kids with tattoos in high school in this show, but
yeah, I've noticed that in a bunch of teenage-based shows lately. There's a lot of tattoos. I'm like, what?
Yeah, I think the 20-something.
Still have to be 18, is my understanding.
Yeah, I think the 20-somethings are getting the 18-year-old parts. So I think that's what's happening. But so she is using, in my mind, tarot cards to have a conversation with Clay, even though she says she's reading his fortune. This is the beginning, and it ends in an interesting discussion.
What did the cards say?
This one? 9 of Wands, but it's reversed, which means you feel like the world is against you.
Really?
Seems right. Like accusing people of ratting you out.
Like I didn't mean to accuse
The Hermit, also reversed. You're isolated, alone.
Big deal. Everybody's alone.
Very un-Clay Jensen thing to say. 10 of Swords. You keep falling back into the pain of the past. You can't face your sadness, your fear. You can't move on.
What the hell are you doing?
Page of Cups.
You're talking about Hannah.
The cards are showing someone who's struggling inside. Tortured. Emotionally.
Why are you so pissed at me?
Just reading your cards, Clay.
I don't get how it is you're the one who's mad at me. You stopped talking to me freshman year.
Really? First day of school, you didn't see me down the hallway and then turn the other way?
Oh, I didn't know what to say.
How about, hey, Sky, how's it going?
You changed.
Yeah, well, so did you. You used to be cool.
You used to be nice.
Oh, we can't all be nice girls like Sherry or Hannah.
Why do you talk shit about Hannah? What did she ever do to you?
Besides, ignore me.
You're just jealous of her.
Why would I be jealous of a dead girl? What she did was stupid.
You don't know anything about it.
I know she didn't go through anything different than any of us. We all get through it.
Yeah? Then what's that?
He's pointing to cuts on her wrist.
It's what you do instead of killing yourself. Suicide is for the weak.
Suicide's for the weak.
In fact, though, that would suggest that there are a lot of weak kids out there, but by the statistics, and that's not true.
Yeah.
Suicide just is the leading cause of kids. I think it's 17 to 24 are still considered kids.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's above that is accidents.
Right.
And I thought, how interesting that like one is totally, it's an accident, and the other one is on purpose. So you're either going to have a car accident and go, oops, you're like, gosh, I wish something different had happened. Or there's these kids just checking out of their lives. About 40,000, well, this is adults and kids, but 40,000 people in the United States kill themselves every year.
Wow.
which is more than any homicides and more than breast cancer, and those are the things that we hear: anti-crime laws, anti-crime this, anti-crime that. And then we also have like all the fundraising for the breast cancer research and all that stuff and the activities, but we don't have this prevalence of suicide prevention funding and programs out there. This girl is pointing out something that I think is another reason why so many people are drawn to. I know I had lots of similar experiences to some of these girls in the high school. And when we get into the second episode, there'll be more to talk about there. But she says she didn't go through anything different than anybody else. And that's pretty on average, but it's how you deal with it. And we can't say that this girl cutting on herself was dealing with it any better along the way, because that's a different emotional outlet for pain. But we all, you grin and bear it and you try to get through it when you think that there is no way out.
I binged watched this show in the past few days. Not a fun binge, but at the end of it, I grabbed my 15-year-old son and I said, "Hey, let's watch something different. Let's watch something, totally different." So we put on Back to the Future, one of my favorite movies. Very date rapey, actually. Quite date rapey, with Biff trying to jump on Lorraine, the mom, in the car where Dad walks up and get your damn hands off her. I mean, people were groping all over her and trying to, rape her, basically. And I'm like, oh, you don't even when I said it to you, you kind of like squirreled up your face going, when was there date rape in Back to the Future? Oh, it's there. Right. But we don't see it. That's what I mean. That's the universality of these type of situations that, guys get a little handsy on dates and girls say no and then they force themselves and I mean, that happens a lot in regular life. And if you go back and watch some of the other movies, it's in there too. It's represented there. So yes, a lot of people go through these things, but you don't know what context, right? Like in the middle of that clip, Sky says to Clay, "You started ignoring me the beginning of sophomore year." What? Well, didn't you see me walking down the hallway and you turned and went the other way? Yeah. That was significant to her. And he's like, "I'm just awkward. I didn't know what to say." She says, "Well, how about hello?" It was like, whatever. So people, both of them reading each other wrong and attributing, these negative intentions onto each other. And they really don't know. I mean, I was looking at my teenagers. I'm like, these are the first time they've had these emotions since they were like 3. Right? Because now they have all these hormones and they're more powerful emotions than they've ever been. How do I deal with this? Gee, I must be the only one. This is overwhelming. And so I kind of understand how life can suck and nobody likes high school because this is huge.
We're all walking around like everything's a projection, right? Everything that we look at and see and receive and hear is a projection of what we either need or, it's a projection of like an unmet need or our own thought process of what we wish for, those kind of things. So this girl perceived that she was being slighted. And as you said, it's so hard to deal with the emotions. I know you have 2 teenage boys. One's now a young adult. He's 18, right?
Yep.
And I remember I worked in a home with teenage girls. And it was 24 at any given time in separate houses. But I had 6 to myself that would interchange over the course of a few months or a couple of years there. And oh my goodness, all we kind of did was like, they were like, what's that? It's not ping pong, the game, the arcade game with the balls that go back and pinball. That's what I'm thinking of.
Okay.
They're like little pinball, like markers of emotions, and like we're like bouncing around as the counselors in the house. It's like walking up against one wall, against the next, with all these emotions flying around of like girls. They were all 12 to 18 years old, or I guess we'd say 12 to 17, right? They aged out at 18, and it was just managing the emotions some days just to get some sense of peace around the area and getting them to do certain things to calm themselves down was quite funny. When you look around, I have visions of like a girl polishing her sneakers because that would calm her down, and another girl writing charts of things because that would calm her down. But their emotions are so strong during that time, so hard to manage.
I worked with group homes also, teenage boys, and so I guess like 13 to 18, and they had drama, but it wasn't like emotional rejection, hurt feelings drama. It was more about, it was almost like everybody had to figure out their line in the pecking order. Right. So if you were trying to challenge your position in the pecking order, you would either be able to work your way up or work your way down. And it was mostly through verbal hostility, right? Picking on each other or physically picking on each other behind the scenes that we didn't know about as, leaders of the group home. But once they settled in that, they were like, all right, this is my role. This is my position. And they're totally different than teenage girls. I tell my teenage boys, I'm like, the bummer about being a teenage boy is you have to date teenage girls, and teenage girls are crazy because you can't figure it out. I mean, women are a mystery to men anyway, and teenage girls are a huge unsolvable mystery to teenage boys.
That's a good way of putting it. And then it's not even just like you were talking about in the house, but then we've got them, and just like any parent, they're going out into the world every day, and then they come home with their own, so the girls kind of assimilated the same way with their little pecking order and stuff. So we had the hierarchy in the house, of who was in charge and those kind of things. But these girls, though, go out into the school world, in their daytime life and come home with their drama. And that's what it was, kind of going, oh my gosh, what boy said what boy didn't say what, how'd they do in their class, did they look fat in their gym clothes, all those things that just put pressure on young people in general, because I know boys struggle with the same thing. It just looks different.
Yeah, everything's so significant, and that's what you don't get. It's like, come on, that's nothing. So your teacher said that. That doesn't mean they hate you. Oh yeah, my teacher hates me.
Yes.
Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but you can't base it just on that one comment. You don't know. But yeah, women they tend to remember things, and and I don't even say necessarily they remember them inaccurately. They just remember the detail. And most of the time, at least the boys that I've interacted with, it's more just a global sense, as opposed to she said this, she did that, she looked this way. And then when you add how you're gathering all your social reactions from the internet, which is a rotten place to be able to pick up on nuance and subtlety and nonverbal and all that, because it's all two-dimensional text, now they're overwhelmed, right? Now there's no way to be safe. Well, as we move on, as I think we say in therapy, family is as sick as their secrets. And here's a clip that relates to that.
Look, you've been very, very kind to us. But I don't think you're telling us the whole truth, and you need to. Now.
Hannah has secrets, Mrs. Baker.
Hannah's secrets are what killed her, and they do not get to stay that way. Do you understand? I mean, clearly she was trying to work something out here. And there are names that are crossed out. Kat, Mrs. Bradley, Mrs. Antilli, and then you're on here. Why are you?
I don't know.
Yours is the only name with a question mark, Tony. Why?
That's one of the things as a parent, as I've sat next to my coworker and friend who lost her son coming up on 4 years ago in July, figuring out the why. Now, Hannah left whys. Whether you agree with that they're significant enough to kill her, it doesn't matter. These are her reasons. This is her perspective. And so often when people do, either they'll get a note or they'll get some indication from their online presence or whatever of the why someone committed suicide. It's almost never enough. There's really, it's like that resolution when you find your someone's killer. It's like, okay, that's great. They're in jail, or we found the reason why they committed suicide, and you just want to go back and argue and say, that's not enough. It's not enough. Those things are not enough. There are tons of people who would have been around you to support you had they known, but in this case, Hannah felt, and probably in most cases, they feel alone and hopeless, and they don't feel like they can reach out to anybody else.
I found some information from a site, Survivors of Suicide, and just to kind of explain things a little bit, and really no matter what the actual item is that caused Hannah to do it, and in this case it's the stories of the friends, but it's always the stimulus for the suicide is pretty much always intolerable psychological pain. I mean, it just comes down to that. It doesn't, I mean, in the end, does it matter if it was a breakup or a rejection from somebody you had a crush on, or you failed an exam and you're a top student and you failed an exam because you had a stressful day and it didn't go well? Does it really matter? The end result is that the event that caused the pain doesn't really matter. It's just the resulting pain. And that's by how we interpretate, I do have a doctorate here, and how we interpret what goes on for us, and then the frustrated psychological needs, right? So Hannah needed people to see her for who she was, not all their perceptions. Oh, she was a slut, or she got around, or she was not likable, or any of these things that she projected was going on.
So at one point towards the end, we get to the place where she does this one last reach out, one last chance to say, hey, you know what? I've talked about all these things on tape. I kind of feel like I'm through it, which is an interesting point, right? She talked about all those things on tape. Then she's like, I might give life one more chance. Which to me goes to, you got to talk to somebody. You got to let your secret out, whether it's with a close trusted friend or a mentor or a parent or a school counselor or an outside counselor or somebody. You got to talk to somebody in order to shine a light on what's going on with you. And sometimes just by the process of talking about it, as did with her tapes, there's no other inputs when she's talking on her tapes, it almost got Hannah through it. So doing something, right? You got to be somewhat proactive, but usually people are so depressed when they're in that stage of suicide, which is why oftentimes when people start an antidepressant, they then commit suicide because they have the energy, not because the medication gave them the drive to commit suicide. It's more, I want to kill myself, but I can't get off the couch. I take a medication, I have energy to get off the couch. Now I have the energy to kill myself. So sometimes there's that kind of confound when people are like, oh, nope. So I know someone who took that med and they killed themselves. Yeah, that happens, and it's listed as a side effect of most antidepressants, because that's what happens is they start to feel better and then they have the energy to kill themselves. But reach out is the message. Reach out is the message of this whole 13 reasons why and what we're doing, but reach out. And here she does with a counselor.
Lost, I guess. Sort of empty.
Empty?
Yeah, I don't feel anything. Like, I don't care anymore.
You don't care about what?
About anything. School, myself, the people here, my parents.
Your parents?
I mean, I care about them, but I'm not who they need me to be.
I bet you were like me, sitting on pins and needles watching this conversation between Hannah and the school counselor.
Absolutely. You just wanted him to say the right thing, ask the right question, say, Hannah, you can't leave right now. Make sure that she was attended to, because what she was saying was pretty serious.
I think one of the things that they did that to me kind of rang home, obviously you and I, when we're in session, we don't bring our phones and start answering, and the phone doesn't ring and the door doesn't knock. That's one of the things about being a therapist is once you're in and that door closes, Nobody interrupts you. I mean, if someone was to interrupt one of my counseling sessions, I would assume that one of my relatives was on the way to the hospital.
Yeah, or the building was on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? There's an immediate cause to interrupt that. But I think in all these years of being in practice, I don't think I've ever, thankfully, I think somebody did it once that didn't know any better. But I remember just being very, very angry because we're there for the client. And
100%.
Nothing is more important than the client when we're sitting with them.
And in this scene, he's sitting in a glass office and his desk phone rings more than once. His cell phone rings more than once because he's not exclusively a come talk to me and tell me your emotions counselor. He's
probably more like a guidance counselor at school.
Right. And he has administrative duties because as soon as he gets off the phone and Hannah's standing in the hallway hoping for him to come out, he's like, yep, sir, I'll get that right. I'll get that done right away. I'll move on. I'll handle that task. I'll answer this issue. I mean, by the time she walks out, he's got 3 other things on his agenda, which it just stung because if Hannah was sitting in your office with you and it was an hour-long session, she wouldn't have got away with this 20-minute, I'm going to dance around all my hopelessness and then escape. You'd have had an hour with her.
Right. And in fact, we get trained. I remember there was 7 questions we needed to ask when assessing somebody. And I'm going to talk from a website called the Square Program, which is an educational resource for healthcare professionals that I found when looking up some background for this. And they give a list of questions, and I'm going to say some of the basic questions. Now, I want to put it out there for those that are listening. This is what professionals are trained to ask. This is not for you necessarily to ask your friend. Your friend needs help. If someone's listening and they're like, oh, well, my friend is depressed, I'm going to ask these things. This is really questions for the professional to ask to assess further. If your friend is despondent, hopeless, helpless, says those kind of things, I wish I wasn't here anymore, those kind of things, you want to get your friend help no matter what, or you need to tell somebody in case they don't say anything.
Before you jump in, I want to put in Selena Gomez had a great tagline, and so this is the default for anybody who wants to get more help.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with saying that you need help. And if you need help at all, you can go to 13reasonswhy.info to find an organization in your area. You can help others by spreading it as well.
So you ran into something that the questions that counselors should ask.
She said something like, I wish my life would go away, or I wish I wasn't here anymore, something like that.
Oh, and, wait, let me play that clip because I thought
we needed to go further.
I thought it's one more. He asked the question and I actually wrote, this would be a great counselor. This is a great counselor question. And here it is.
When you leave this office, how would you like things to be different for Hannah?
I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm expecting.
All right. Well, it sounds like there's something that you need that you're not getting. So let's start there.
I need it to stop.
You need what to stop?
I need everything to stop. Just people, life.
So what would need to be different, right? That's the miracle question, right? If you woke up tomorrow and the miracle happened and your problems went away, how would you notice? He asked that. That's a good question. And she gives what is kind of an ideation answer. I need life to stop.
When someone says something like that, we want to ask, what does that mean? Do you have thoughts of wanting to take your own life? Have you had suicidal thoughts? Have you actually thought of killing yourself? And using the words killing yourself. There was a lot of times I remember being trained on that, and everybody going in graduate school, oh my gosh, isn't that going to upset somebody if we say that to them? Isn't that going to give them a reminder that they could kill themselves? And we know now that that doesn't mean that. What we know is that, and from experience, I mean, we've been doing this a long time. We know that if we ask that and they really haven't, that answer's easy. And they go, oh, no, that's not where I'm going.
Nobody's
no, it never goes like that.
Oh, well, I hadn't thought about that. What? Gee, I'm glad you brought it up. I believe suicide will be a great option. Thanks for bringing it up. No, that never happens.
No, it never happens. So we want to ask them directly, have you had suicidal thoughts? We want to know, have you talked about killing yourself with anybody else? Have you shared that with anybody else? Because usually that means that they're then thinking about it for real and looking for some help. Have you thought about how you would kill yourself? Very important. We look at the plan, and sometimes they say no. I remember assessments where clients would say, well, I thought I would just shoot myself. And then you have to go, well, do you have access to a gun? Oh, no. Okay. Have you figured out where to buy a gun? Oh, no, I haven't even thought about that. So then you start winding backwards. Okay, well, let's look at the time that we have before you go from thinking about it to actually going about finding the place to buy it and buying it. Let's try and intercept those thoughts.
And that's
so we look at the plan.
And that's where counselors are charged with. You've got this person who has thought about suicide, but they don't have a plan. And if you were to call the 5150 or the involuntary hold people, and they were to do the assessment, they'd be like, well, they're not actively suicidal, so we can't hold them, especially when you're talking about a youth. So that's why you got to get into these details as a counselor and find out where are they in their suicidality or in their ideation and plan.
Right, because that's where this counselor fell short. He didn't go deep with her, and she had already done the tapes. She had already finished the tapes. She had, left the map. She had decided that she was going to kill herself. And so he just needed to ask. He needed to go deeper. He needed to, probe a little bit longer with her. But he took her quick answers and let them sit rather than going with, I should go deeper with this kid. I should really try and find something out. And quite frankly, I don't know really what his position was there, but I mean, couldn't he have called the parents? He should have, could have, would have. Even if he asked her, she said, well, I've thought about it. And so then he would go deeper and say, have you thought about the plan? And she had the plan. She
did.
Could have told him the plan. Okay, what stopped you from putting the plan into action so far?
Right.
And she could say, I'm here today. That's what's stopping it right now, right?
Right.
Ideally, right? I'm painting the ideal scenario. But thing is, once you get that person talking about it, they will say something like that to you someday. They'll say, or sometimes they say, my kids are the only thing that keep me alive. Great. For older people.
Yeah.
Great. That's enough.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Because he said, I would never leave my kid behind because I chose to kill myself. Great. Let me know if that changes for you. In the meantime, let's work on your coping skills so that you don't feel so distressed.
It's all about hope. And that's what you could almost see just the hope squeezing out like the toothpaste out of a tube in her. And once she had lost all hope, that's when she went to the counselor, right? Yeah. She's like, I just don't have any other reason. I've cited all of these horrible things about how my life is screwed up and how I'm no good, and I don't have any hope. And that was the whole discussion with her counselor, was that lack of hope, that hopelessness.
And there's more to that scene that I think we should save for the second episode when we talk about the other themes in the show. But he really fails her in this. And then at some point she gets up and she leaves because he actually gave her more to be hopeless about. And when she gets up to leave, she's hoping that the narration says she's hoping that he gets up to follow her. And she stops and waits for him to come after her. But her interpretation is even the counselor doesn't seem to think I matter. And come after her to try to really go, hey, Hannah, wait a minute. I need to know more.
And that is a thing where I don't know if it's teenage or I think we all just want people to be able to read what we need, to hear what we're not saying and give us what we're not asking for. Because there's a couple times in this show where she says one thing and wants another. She kicks Clay out of the room when they're making out and she wants him to stay, but every indication that he should go. If he stays, he's a jerk. And then with the counselor, she said, oh, no, I'll be fine. I'm taking off. And she wants him to follow because she really doesn't want to go through it with the suicide.
Yeah, and that's what's so terrible about this is that she then constructs these tapes to blame everybody, but she also didn't tell them. She didn't say in the opportunities that she had for different outcomes with different people. I mean, there were tragic things that happened that she had no control over. But something like that scene with Clay that we're definitely going to play for is part 2. There was an opportunity there for her to express herself differently, and she didn't. So then it became a perception battle about what was really happening. And Clay didn't know what to do, so he ran out of the room the way that she was telling him to go and didn't know that he could fix it.
And I think that as we all listen and we all watch this, or at least listen to this podcast, you're really asking yourself, how can I stop someone? How can I intervene? How can I be an agent of change when someone's talking about changing their, or even thinking about taking their own life? And you kind of go back and forth, right? You want to say, take the opportunities of someone who might be hurting, reach out to somebody, have conversations, build the relationship, let them know that they're not alone. And then there are times where we say, well, you really can't tell, because one person's, general sad day could be, they could rebound tomorrow and we don't know. And I think in the end, really, and this does point to it in one of the last scenes, is all we can do to help the people in our lives is to be kind and thoughtful and empathetic, and not pick on people. And if you do, then make amends. Try to own what you got. But aside from that, there's really, unless someone's putting it in your face, like kind of like Hannah is doing with the counselor, she's setting it right there on the table. She's not putting the puzzle together, but all the pieces are on the table for him. And so as we all look, gosh, I don't want my teens taking their own lives. I don't want anybody, any of their friends, any of them that I know, any people that I work with, I don't want anybody to take their own life. And I figure the best I can do is just be as good of a friend, or build whatever type of relationship I have with them in the best way I can, in an effort to say, hey, life is good. If you're thinking about suicide, I hope I'm a person on your list that you can come to and talk to. Because we've covered that there are some clues that are more obvious, but sometimes there are no clues. And so you just kind of have to be kind and be thoughtful and own everything that you do to someone as soon as you can, so that it doesn't stick with them.
Found some other information on how many people are affected by a suicide, but and I'll talk about that, but one of the things that the researcher, her name is Julie Serrell, Cerel, one of the things that she was talking about was that when they did this big study on suicidality and people who attempt and people who actually die of suicide, it really was that some people's suicide were definitely intercepted by people being nice to them just on the day that they were thinking they were done. So you never know when you are saying hello and smiling at somebody, or saying have a good day, or hey, I care about you, giving somebody a call that you hadn't thought of in a while, or for the teenagers, talking to the friend you hadn't talked to in 2 years because you're in different social groups, right? I remember junior high having talks with my friends at 6th grade when we were going into 7th grade, how we were all going to stay best friends. And all of a sudden, this different social dynamics, some people are cool, some people aren't. And all of a sudden you go, what happened? Yeah. We were like best friends in Girl Scouts last year. And so reach out, say hi to that person you hadn't talked to in a while. Say something nice, compliment, hey, great shirt, whatever. Like, notice them, because you never know what others are struggling with. This thing that I mentioned about how many people are affected by a suicide. There used to be research out there. And so the producers talk about, it's actually older research, and saying that on average, 6 people are affected by a person's suicide. Now, we know that that's not true. I mean, there were 6 people left behind just in my immediate nuclear family by my brother's suicide, let alone the friends, the cousins, the teachers, everybody else that loved him. And what we know now, this Julie Serrell, if you look up #not6, it is this movement to raise awareness that it's actually more than about, they say it's about 115 to 125 people are personally affected by a person's suicide. And I actually have a bit of the breakdown of how they came up with that. And they say that it's 11 or more people have devastating effects on their life, like us, like your friend, the immediate repercussions of, our family life, our family history is changed forever by that. Then 25 or more people have a major life disruption. So not devastating, but major life disruption over that. So you, as the person who knew and loved this boy since he was so young, would be the major life disruption. Life disrupted for a short time could be 53 or more people. Yeah. And then little effect, but still affected by the suicide. The friends that maybe they fall out of touch with in college that hear about it and go, oh my God, how did that happen? He was so young. That's there's that total of 115 or more people. And that's usually now when we talk about the questions that we get trained to ask, one of the things that we were trained not to do is to say, do you know how bad everybody else is going to feel if you go through with this? You know, that is not where we get trained to go.
No.
But there is that thing that it's definitely more, if anybody's listening to this, and I'm sure we're going to catch some people who are struggling and that were interested in this show because they relate in the current state of mind that they're in. You never understand how many people care about you and how many people will notice that you are no longer part of their world. We have research now that shows that, and anybody that you talk to there's 40,000 people that are killing themselves this year. There's going to be a lot of people affected by that, a lot of trauma remaining because of that. And there's so much trauma in that. So if you think about the 40,000, I can't even do the math to come up with 115 people for all those 40,000 people. It's a lot of people just right here in the United States. Nobody realizes how many lives they touch.
I think one of the things that we've, in the process of preparing for this podcast, is we've run into the controversy associated with it. And, you know, a lot of people are saying, well, they were so graphic in their rape scene. They were so graphic in their suicide scene. They were so graphic in the parents discovering their daughter recently deceased body. You know, they were so graphic in all of that. And when they talked in the After 13 Reasons episode, where I think the producers did a great job, and we'll play some of those clips here in a second. But one of the things that they were talking about is that some people were saying they're too graphic. Other people are saying, no, not graphic enough. And the producers said, we were graphic because it's a graphic topic. And we're not glorifying suicide. We're not glorifying rape. We're bringing the visceral, kind of gritty experience of the whole thing, because people are going to say, well, why didn't Hannah respond this way when she was being raped? Or why didn't other people respond this way when she was contemplating suicide? They said, you know, it's that visceral reality that I think they were trying to bring forward, and they're saying this is a in the shadows topic. Let's talk about it. Let's continue the conversation that this series is bringing up, and that's part of what this podcast is about, to continue the conversation.
And they mentioned, I actually wrote it down because I was like, that's exactly explains how it feels. It's the pain that never goes away when you've been touched by a suicide. No matter how graphic the scene is, when you've been touched by a suicide, that doesn't come close to what it truly feels like when it's someone you love.
Yeah.
And they said it was to also honor and respect the people who did go through it. And I know for me, I was crying my eyes out on the couch on that scene. It's hard for me. I'm feeling it come up right now as we talk about it. On my re-binge watching, I couldn't actually, I was in the car and I was listening to it, and that scene was coming up and I turned it off. I certainly didn't want to be driving when that one came on.
Yeah, don't need it again. And so, but we want kids to be able to ask for help. And a lot of times we as adults, we don't understand the teenage mind and the brain, how it works. So here's in their After the 13 Reasons show, this is one of the clips that they talk about that.
You got to start opening up to us, kid. Just, you know, let us know what's going on.
It's hard to be the parent of a teenager. The teenagers are trying to establish some independence. Sometimes when they would like help on some level, they're also pushing it away. And both Clay and Hannah at times really would like some help, but they don't know how to ask for it.
And I think a lot of times as counselors of teens, we have parents who bring us kids and they're like, look, I don't want to know what they tell you. I just want them to have a place where they can talk about what they need or talk about what's going on in their life to someone who's not mom or dad, but is also a reliable adult human to interact with. But a lot of times they don't know how to ask for help.
And that's why for those that tell their friends some things that sound like they might be on the suicidal path or depression, you know, it's important that if your friend isn't going to say anything for themselves, that you tell someone. And we should also mention that it's going to feel like a betrayal of their trust. Yeah. You're going to say, well, I told them I would just hold their, you know, like let them talk to me and I wouldn't tell anybody. Well, they can be mad at you. They can even hate you and be alive than be dead. It's one of those things you have to wrestle with. Do I betray their trust, or do I let them, you know, do I hold their secret? And holding a secret is never going to be good for anybody.
And that's one of the things as counselors they take out of our hands. Confidentiality is prized very, very highly through courts and everything else. They say, you know, what you talk about to your counselor is confidential, except if you're going to kill yourself, kill someone else, or child abuse, and there's a couple other less frequent ones. But suicide is one of the ones we're not allowed to hold on to. They can't say, I'm going to kill myself, and you go, all right, but I can't tell anyone. No, even as counselors in the profession, they take away that ability of ours to keep it a secret. We have to take steps to get people to a safe place and with safe people. So if your friend is talking to you, that's one you can't mess around with because there's no undoing it, right? So they said, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to rob a liquor store. Okay, well, that's probably not the greatest idea, but we as counselors don't have to turn people in for that. But if your friend says they're thinking about killing themselves, then you have to. I mean, you can't take the risk that you're going to wake up tomorrow and that's the first thing you read on your phone is that your friend killed themselves after they talked to you. And that's the trick is, as a therapist and I talk to kids, I want my kids to talk to me. And guess what? I already know they don't. I am not their confidant on a lot of things. And I'm like, man, I invested all these years and raised them and I was always in their lives and concerned and whatever. And still when they get to teenage, they don't necessarily want to talk to me, but I've reached out to my kids' friends before and said, hey, they're going through this thing. Are they talking to you guys about it? Oh yeah, we heard all about it. I'm like, okay, as long as they're talking to somebody, because I know they
Good
don't
for you, Dad.
Yeah, well, there was things concerning. You know, a kid breaks up with a girl. You're like, he's not talking to me about it. I hope he's talking to someone. And he was. So that was helpful. But in the end, we only know what they'll tell us, and sometimes that's not much.
Hannah, you can sit down. You don't need to be in a hurry.
I need to get on with things, Mr. Porter. If things aren't going to change, then I just better get on with it, right?
Okay. Hey, Hannah.
You only know what they're willing to tell you, and you only know what they're able to tell you. They may Instagram and Snapchat and, Facebook their lives, but that's curated. Even with all of that, you still don't really know what's going on in their life.
That is scary, right? If you have a teenage friend or you have teenage kids, it's scary because you don't know. Yes, it's curated. They put up what they want, but most of the time, us parents, like I'm not in their Snapchat groups. I don't know exactly what's going on, much less if they've been slighted in that social media world and it really stings and it's hurting them. I wouldn't know that. They're not. My kids are not going to come home and cry on my shoulder right away. They might chew on it for a while. So that's the scary part is what you don't know and what they don't tell you.
Absolutely. And that's why when you get those inklings of, knowing that bad things have happened, if you know that the breakup, the bad grade, the upsetting game, somebody dropped the ball, as you said, you want to check and make sure they are talking to somebody about it. And and that's the thing. I mean, we can talk about all this all we want about what to do when you see something or when somebody goes through something. And then there's also that we can go, and there will always be the people that say, yeah, but their Facebook looked like this or their Snapchat looked like that. And, they were a happy kid. They were a good kid. They were a smart kid. None of that matters, and because it's all about what's going on the inside.
And we talk about frontal lobe, like I say, my kids are stupid until they're 25 because their part of their brain isn't developed. But this was an interesting thing from their post show about a different angle on the later development of the frontal lobe for teenagers, which I found really interesting.
Sometimes I'll hear a parent say, well, not my kid. He would never do that, or she would never do that because she's really smart. Her grades are good, and it has nothing to do with that.
Young adults haven't fully formed their frontal lobe, or their executive function, as we call it. And so everything that happens feels like this is forever. They often feel like there's no way out, and this can lead to very impulsive acts.
And I always think about that for the college students who live around here. I'm like, oh, their brains are still dumb. They still haven't figured out that if they stand on the train tracks at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, that they're not going to die. They don't get that. They think it's a fun thing to dodge out of the way at the last second. So I look at them and I'm like, okay, you're not quite done brewing. But I didn't think about the other side, about the frontal lobe development, of the fact that whatever we're going through right now feels like it's going to last forever because of that immaturity in their brain development.
Yeah, and that was one of the themes that just like every time something bad happened to Hannah, there was that tunnel vision that you could see, that she just saw like the wall in front of her, that she just could not see that the world would open up for her. When you know any young people that are going through stuff and they're just so hopeless, like you just want to go, like you have no idea what the future brings, but they just don't see a future. She sees that she's branded this slut, this easy girl, this whatever, that's going to be the thing across her forehead for the rest of her life, even though none of it was true. She, you know, whether it's true or not doesn't matter, but she just sees herself as branded that way and that there's no hope. There was other stuff, obviously, that went on for that besides just that, but those public perceptions get ingrained and they just get so stuck. And that's one of the things when we work with teenagers. I mean, you raised a couple, but you know, my experience is working with them and kind of helping them see a tiny little window that goes into the future that says, hey, there is life after high school. I promise you. I can't promise what it's going to look like, but you should stick around at least to figure it out, because there's definitely going to be opportunities for you to be and do and change and make new friends and do whatever once you get past that. And while you're here, like, let's find the little opportunity, the window of opportunity now to change what today looks like too.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, if you talk to people who are even like late 20s, early 30s, you go like, how much did what happened in high school affect you? And they're like, oh, some, but not a lot. There was a lot more after, right? Everybody looks back on high school and it sucked, but it wasn't. When you take that next phase, whether it's college or just post high school, all of a sudden that high school stuff all looks kind of petty, you know. And yes, Hannah went through some serious, significant things that even if they happen to adults would be traumatizing. Yes. But in the end, most people, their high school situation, you go, yeah, it was a thing, but it wasn't the most defining moments of my life, but it seemed like it at the time.
And I've known people that kind of know of other people's struggles and will say, how can you just like be okay with that? And it's like, well, these things happened so many years ago. Like, why should their lives still be affected by this? Yeah. You know, you grow, you learn, you accept things differently, you understand, you integrate them differently, and you make choices in your life that change how you perceive yourself in the world. So some people get stuck and want to hold on to those things as stuck into that role of your story, like the story of the things that happen to you become like this badge of honor, but it's actually trauma that you're wearing and you can't get past it. Or they become something that you grow from, you know, and you grow through the change based on the stuff you don't like. I don't like the reputation I had, so what do I need to do to kind of live a life that doesn't matter what the past said about me and move forward, that kind of thing, you know, which is what was some of Hannah's struggle.
Which I have two clips right now. One is a little scary as far as offering hope and what we can do, and the other one is more inspiration.
It's important for the viewers to see that there's often a lot of collateral damage when someone dies, and the person contemplating suicide might not realize how much their death will affect people that they love and that they didn't want to hurt.
For those of you who will now be looking for signs everywhere, what does it really look like? Here's the scary thing. It looks like nothing.
There you go. So it looks like nothing.
Yeah. So there's our hashtag not six, you know, discussion, and where we started the show off talking about how when it really happened, the people that we were touched by didn't show the signs when they really went and did it.
Right. When it was time.
Yeah. It looks like nothing.
And then in the disclaimer, before we round out our episode 1 of 2, to me it's a disclaimer. It's interesting that, well, we'll get to the accents after, but I'll play this and then we'll come back and talk about it.
A lot of times it feels like the things that you're experiencing aren't treatable, and that's why it can be overwhelming to try to explain it to someone, because you just feel like there's nothing you can do about it, but there usually is.
It's absolutely treatable. Anxiety is, depression is, talk therapy, treatment centers. There's a million ways that you can find help.
I think a lot of times people feel paralyzed by, I don't know how to talk about this, maybe it'll go away, maybe they seem okay, I don't feel equipped to talk about it, but then nobody talks about it, and that's actually the worst thing that any of us can do. Really, it is about just listening and saying, I'll be there and we'll find the help together.
Yeah, so you know what was interesting when I was watching the 14th reason, or the 13 reasons why after, I think I call it after 13 reasons why, is that that our lead character, Hannah, is she's either from Australia or New Zealand, and our other lead character, Clay, has a British accent, which you hear at the beginning of that clip. And I thought, man, these guys are good actors. If I had to put on a British or an Australian or New Zealand accent, I wouldn't have been able to do it. And here are these kids doing it so flawlessly that I didn't even notice it throughout the whole performance.
Right, and we were so sucked into it because it's so dramatic. You're right, there was no hints at their accent. But the topic they're talking about like we'll get help together and that it can be treated. And I learned this through the episode that I did on Coaching Through Chaos with Dr. Jonathan Singer, who is a researcher and lecturer on suicidality. He's written a big book that schools use to train on suicidality in kids. And he talked about this movement among mental health practitioners. Now, this is not for the people who are intimately connected with the people. It's for the people who are the trained professionals, that there's a movement that all suicides are preventable. The idea is that once somebody's in the mental health care system and they are depressed, they have suicidal thoughts, it should be a preventable item. Not about like your friend is suicidal, like you should be able to stop them from killing themselves. That burden is not to be had, but it's for the professionals. And so they talk about therapy, talking to other people. Just yesterday I went to a psychological based workshop, and half the people there had met through their church because they had sought out the advice initially through their church. So there's lots of people that are connected in that way to some kind of community based helping center, whether that's your church, a therapist, a school, a doctor's office, maybe even, somebody at your gym, your trainer, you might say something. There's endless number of people that you can say something to get the ball rolling and getting you some help.
Yeah, and I think that was in part one of Hannah's downfalls is she was a lot of implied asking for help, right? The closest she got to asking for really any help was with the counselor.
Yes.
And that was even kind of a feeble attempt. So it's like, if you or someone you know is in that situation, just formally reach out for help. I mean, think about you just read those questions that we do as counselors. Most lay people, most people who aren't trained in counseling aren't asking those detailed questions. First of all, they shouldn't, because they don't know who they're dealing with. There's another layer. It's like there are times where my wife wants to diagnose me, or I want to diagnose her physical ailments. And I'm like, well, based on what I know, it's this, which guess what? I'm not trained as a physician. So there ought to be something the doctor knows that I don't. And it's true that the mental health professionals might know some things about this situation and helping that maybe not everybody knows because they haven't been through that education.
And when we go through part 2 of this, when we talk about some of these other themes in the show and how almost universal they are for teenagers or young adult experiences in life, for people who are connecting with this and feeling this way, like you'll get that we're here for a reason. There's a profession of people who deal with emotional health for a reason, because it can be treated. It is important to just say something to someone.
And hopefully what this 13 Reasons Why does. And so hopefully through this discussion and watching it, people will seek help, or at least take the veil off and make it okay to talk about. And if this makes it all right to talk around the water cooler, or to highlight, to someone like, that sounds like you're telling me about that person. It sounds like one of the things that I learned about watching out for suicidality. Maybe you could go back and start up that conversation again and actually get somebody some help when they need it in a timely fashion.
The Suicide Prevention Talk Line. This is a 24-hour line that people can call at any time. It's a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It's 1-800-273-8255. 1-800-273-TALK. And it's open 24 hours a day for maybe you just feel like, I'm going to be judged, or they're not going to believe me, or I don't want to let everybody know like right away. I'm scared to do it. You can call there and get the ball rolling and just talk to somebody. They're staffed by counselors, and you can talk to somebody any time of the day. And I know I used to work a suicide hotline overnight in New York, and sometimes at 3 a.m, we are the only people around that somebody who's struggling can call, right? I don't have somebody I think I could call at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Most of us don't. You could roll over and talk to your wife, but when you're by yourself, you don't have that. So these talk lines are really helpful, and that's what they're there for. You're not going to be judged. You're just going to be connected with some help. once you break that ice and say, this is how depressed I truly am, I'm thinking of killing myself, like I'm having suicidal thoughts, and you start saying it out loud, like the ball is rolling for the help to happen.
Which is the message of this whole thing, is do something.
Yes.
If it's you, reach out to someone. If it's someone else, get them to reach out for help from someone who can actually provide the help that they need. But start somewhere. You can't start until you start. So start. Now that we've started our 13 Reasons Why discussion, next time when we come back, we're going to cover the topics of peer pressure, date rape, keeping secrets, social isolation, and a bunch of other areas that are brought up in addition to suicidality by this 13 Reasons Why show. And it gave us a lot to chew on, to think about, and to discuss. So I'm sure you'll join me next time for part 2.
I think I'll be here, Courtney.
Okay, good. And hopefully everyone else will join us too, because this is an important topic and there's a lot of angles to it, a lot of pieces of it that we want to make sure we cover, because it's significant. Our teenagers and young adults need us to know how to understand what's going on in their lives and the gravity of it, and also ways that we can help. So until next time, we'll save a seat on the movie couch for you.
See you next time.